Yes.
Because the Conservatives can be on the.
Nina,
Oh, really? Okay.
Board of Trade. I mean,
I guess we're ready to get
she better.
started.
Yeah. Well, have fun.
oh God, something like that. It's still a long way away. So
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I saw someone tweet yesterday, like there's 3 lifetimes in an election left, pretty much. Like there's still a
Yeah, 3 weeks
long
is
way to
a
go.
long time, yeah.
I guess we can take it away.
So it's a marathon, but this first week has gone really fast.
It's only been a week, hasn't it? Yeah, it's the
8 days since the writ.
Yes.
crazy.
I know.
Yes. And then I'll take over at that point. Perfect.
Check 1 2 1 2. Testing.
Okay.
No.
Come on, you. Thank you. I know.
Thank you.
Are these the most accurate numbers?
Yes, they are. This is updated at
Okay.
this point.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to
But
make sure.
I'll remind you at the beginning of each question anyway.
Okay. Is there sort of an, oh, these are the alerts to let us know when we're all set
Yes,
time,
these are
right?
the alerts.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Colin.
All right, I guess we're ready to get started. Hello to everybody out there.
Hello, we're gonna get started. Take your seats. We're gonna have a little bit of fun tonight. Welcome to the Mississauga-Streetsville All Candidates Debate for the upcoming provincial election. My name is Jerry Rydrock. I'm the chairperson for the Mississauga Climate Action, this is MCA. Right here in Mississauga, we actually meet at the Unitarian congregation south of the QEW. We have a lot of members in the younger age category, students who are looking for volunteer hours. We provide that through running some projects that are climate aware, like tree planting, Indigenous friendship walks, cultural events, CD Saturday event, which is actually Saturday is coming Saturday at the Unitarian congregation. And our main goal is to hold the city accountable to the climate change action plan, which was passed back in December of 2019. So with that, I'm going to ask Dan Cameron to do our land acknowledgement. Oh, and I want to thank the candidates for showing and for you guys to be here tonight too. Thank you very much.
So let's take a moment to acknowledge the land we're gathered on here today. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We do the land acknowledgement as a small part of reconciliation with Indigenous people. Later on in the debate, we'll be discussing how we can further advance reconciliation in Ontario. And if you found out about this debate through an ad or a poster, that's thanks to the support of Van City Investment Bank. I'd like to welcome Jan Paul from the Clean Energy Project team to say a few words, please.
Good evening. My name is Jan Paul Lowe. I'm a senior associate in the Clean Energy Finance team at Van City Community Investment Bank. Van City Community Investment Bank, or VCIB, is the only bank in Canada that works exclusively with organizations that drive social, economic, and environmental change. Climate change is here, and it affects all of us. In 2021, VCIB's financing supported innovative clean energy projects that avoided 4,300 tons of carbon emissions. The real estate market continues to soar, highlighting the need for affordable alternatives. In 2021, VCIB helped to create and preserve nearly 1,200 affordable housing units. This evening, we put the issues that matter at the forefront of the election. Regardless of the outcome, we aim to work collectively with government and business leaders to find real and tangible solutions at this critical point in time. Good luck to everyone participating in this evening's debate. We're looking forward to hearing your innovative ideas and solutions. Thank you.
Hello, so I'll introduce myself now, although I'm not the main event here. My name is Monica Pavelka. I am a professor in the Department of Geography, Geomatics, and Environment, and I am the Director of Programs on Environment here at UTM. And we're completely delighted to be able to host this debate because we always tell our students that we learn about the environment because we're interested in putting things into action and political action and to exercise this democratic right. So I just want to start off by again thanking the candidates for being here. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves, and I'm going to read from some notes here about the rules of debate here. So thank you all for attending and being part of this debate. Debates are a critical first step in making progress on the issues that voters care about, because what doesn't get debated doesn't get done. In order for this event to be safe and inclusive to all, we are setting some community ground rules. Firstly, there will be absolutely no tolerance of hate speech, personal attacks towards candidates or other participants, or anything of the like. In order to have productive conversations and a healthy democracy, respect for one another is absolutely essential. Secondly, while disagreement is inevitable and healthy discourse is encouraged, our debate is tightly structured for verbal discussions between candidates and the community. Various forms of protest will not be permitted in order to ensure that everyone has a chance to hear candidates' positions on various subjects, especially as we have many topics to cover in an extremely limited amount of time. All right, so the structure of the debate then will be, we have our three candidates. We have another candidate who has joined us at the last minute. So unfortunately, this candidate will not be able to be part of the structured part of the debate, but we will allow this candidate to speak a little bit at the end and to make some concluding remarks. All right, so the structure of the debate will be, we have 8 questions that the candidates have received ahead of time. We have a preordained order in which they will address that, and we will tell them how many minutes they have to address that question. And then each candidate has been given 3 wild cards, which gives them the opportunity to, and I know it sounds like a game show, doesn't it? So you have the opportunity to exercise those 3 wild cards to either elaborate on their position or respond to something that was raised by another candidate. And so that would also then go in the order in which those questions were asked. Okay, so without any further ado, I will invite, we have Jill Kamoli from the Liberal Party, we have Nicholas Raba and Rayad from the NDP, and Rayad Rahman from the Green Party. And so in that order, I will give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So please, Jill, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Monica, and thank you for everyone who is here tonight, whether you're here personally or virtually. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to come together and have this conversation. I am your Ontario Liberal candidate here in Mississauga-Streetsville. I am a public health advocate. I have been running an organization called For Jude for Everyone for the last 6 years since we lost one of our children to a school flu outbreak. For me, as a candidate, it's all about making sure that we're doing everything we can for our families, for our communities, and fighting to protect our health, our lives, and our well-being. We have a government right now that has not been prioritizing that throughout the last 4 years. We've been seeing deep cuts to our healthcare, to our schools, to care for seniors, and there has been absolutely no care for our environment here in Mississauga or throughout Ontario. So it is time that we put our priorities back in order and make sure that we're fighting for our communities, for each other, and for this entire province. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jill. So next we'll hear from Nicholas.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicholas Raba. I am the Ontario NDP candidate here in Mississauga-Streetsville. Thank you so much to GreenPAC and UTM and students and everyone for organizing this event. I am looking forward to a really great discussion tonight. I believe that the COVID-19 pandemic has been a dress rehearsal for the climate crisis, as hundreds of millions of workers around the world have been struggling. Billionaires, bosses of large corporations have doubled, even tripled their profits and net worth. The same trend is what we can expect during the climate crisis if we allow the planet that sustains our survival and our economy to be torn apart by greed and the powers that serve it. Corporations use their economic power to purchase political power. It is clear that the Conservative Party is a party that is totally committed to climate disaster, just as they committed to COVID-19 disaster. Their candidate was smart enough to not even show up today. But these corporate profits are also what Trudeau and his Liberal government protect. They talk one way and act another. We will fight for a greener Ontario that leads the way in our planet's quest to save itself from disaster. I wish to join you in that fight on behalf of everyone in Streetsville, and thank you.
Very much. And finally, Riyadh, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm actually but I'm running for the Green Party of Ontario. Who I am is not as important as what I stand for. What I stand for is change. What I stand for is development in terms of us as a community coming together and inclusive and making that difference. And that is what we in the Green Party are doing. I'm a chartered accountant by trade, and I am someone who has a lot of interest in terms of the non-profit organizations, helping them develop wherever they can, working with them, not just here in Canada, but across the Caribbean.
Thank you very much. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say. Just a couple of things for those of us in the audience. So once again, Colin, our volunteer here, is going to be the one keeping you on track in terms of time. It says that we have very tight on timelines. I did want to mention that Florence will be speaking for the Populist Party of Ontario after we have wrapped things up. But for the audience, if you have questions, there's two ways of doing it. If you were here in person, we have two volunteers. You can pass your questions down. You've got some pieces of paper there. You can pass the question down. Rosa will bring the questions to me. And if you are watching online, hello, you can put your questions in the chat. And so we'll collate those depending on how many we have, whether we will be able to address all of them or just a selection. So please do participate in this debate as much as you would like. So it's your debate as well. All right, so we have 8 questions to go through. So we have quite a bit of ground to cover here. And so before I read the question, for each question, I'm going to say how much time each candidate has. Again, we have the wild card format if you wish to exercise that. And we have randomized the order in which the candidates will address it. So I'll let you know you can prepare when you're going to come up. Okay. So our first question is about climate change. It's just a single question, and there's 2 minutes per candidate. And the order in which we will go will be Nicholas, then Riyadh, then Jill. Okay. The question is, as Southern Ontario warms twice as rapidly as the rest of the world, Ontarians are looking for progress on climate change. What are your party's greenhouse gas reduction targets? What are the key elements of your emission reduction plan, including how your party would pay for it and to ensure targets are met? So please, Nicholas, you have the floor.
Amazing. So I will start with our plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think it is incredibly bold. We are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below their 2005 levels by 2030. And we are going to get to net zero emissions right here in Ontario by 2050. We have seen the Liberals' policy, whether it be a leave cap and trade plan or a carbon tax that simply does not address the key roots of the issue. 80% of emissions released by big corporations are not being taxed under the Liberals' carbon tax plan. We are going to reintroduce cap and trade in a bold way that is going to put $30 billion of revenue back into the province, and we are going to spend 25% of that money investing in rural communities, northern communities, and Indigenous communities. Put that money where it needs to go to address the climate crisis. Trying to see if I missed anything here. We are also focused on our Green New Deal. This is a revolutionary policy, in my opinion. It is centered on fundamentally changing the way we see climate change. We are going to rebuild our infrastructure in Ontario in a green and sustainable way. That means investing in hydro, investing in solar, investing in clean new energy sources. But that's not the most exciting part. I like to pitch the economic side of it. This plan is going to put 1.1 million new jobs into Ontario. These are jobs you can pay the bills with. These are jobs you can support a family on. We are going to revolutionize the economy and fight climate change with our Green New Democratic Deal. We can have it all, folks, but we need to elect a government that is willing to stand up to greedy corporations whose only interest is profit and certainly not protecting the environment right here in Ontario.
Okay, so thank you very much, Nicholas. Riyadh, thank you.
So our climate plan provides an honest and a practical roadmap to achieving net zero. It's based on three main priorities. One is crushing climate pollution. Secondly, restoring water and nature. And finally, coming together to succeed. Crushing, so on one hand, what we're going to do is we have to fight climate pollution. On the other hand, we have to put things in place with our nature and our water and nature plan that will help the planet revive itself, or at least here in Canada. And then certainly we come to, and lastly, we come together as a community where we transition to a healthy, affordable, and resilient community as possible. Now, how we plan to do this? Crushing climate pollution. We intend to invest heavily in public transport and electric mobility, retrofitting homes, reducing sprawl and smarter developments, generating electricity from clean and renewable sources. On the water side, so on one hand, we are fighting those pollution, and on the other hand, we are putting the things in place to help the planet revive, and that we talk about in our plan, protecting our wetlands, forests, wetlands and forests, working with the indigenous communities to preserve water and land, cleaning up the air and water in the worst pollutant areas, and bringing nature back to cities like green roofs and schoolyard green projects. In my last 20 seconds, I just want to say how we're going to pay for this. And basically, our plan is to put a $4 billion green bond plan in place, divert or to redirect about $16 billion from the subsidized electricity to our plan. And lastly, 1% climate change surcharge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Now, Jill, please.
Thank you. Okay. The previous Liberal government phased out coal, and we recognize the urgency in our situation today. An elected Ontario Liberal government will reestablish Ontario's leadership on the environment, cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below the 2005 levels by 2030. With our plan for $1 a ride public transit across Ontario, including subway, bus, and the GO train, will take 400,000 cars off the road. We'll make it easier for more Ontarians to choose electric vehicles by putting EV incentives back in place and rebuilding and growing charging infrastructure. These are real plans. This is a fully costed platform. These are not ideas. These are things that we know that we can do. I'm really excited about this because this is time for real action that we know that we can accomplish. And it's no longer time to sit, to wait, to hesitate. This crisis is here now, and our children cannot wait for us to continue to think and to ponder. It's time for real plans in action.
Thank you very much, Jill. And so I just want to make a general comment that please, we'll hold our applause till the very end, please, so we can get through. Does anybody wish to exercise a wild card for this?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. Okay, so moving on to our next question. So this is a two-parter. We're going to talk about energy transition here. So the first question, you've got 2 minutes, and we're going to keep the sort of the order for both the first question and the second question. And so it will be Riyadh will speak first, and then Nicholas, and then Jill. And so the first question here, if you have 2 minutes to respond, is reimagining energy generation will be crucial in achieving rapid reductions in Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating the impacts of climate change. How will your government shift quickly away from greenhouse gas emitting electricity to renewals, such as wind, solar, hydro, district heating and cooling, to provide Ontarians with cleaner and cheaper electricity? All right, so please, Riyadh, go ahead.
Thank you. As we in the Ontario Greens, we eliminate gas-fired electricity. The fastest way compatible with minimizing Ontario's total climate pollution. We will phase out fossil gas as quickly as possible, aiming at 2030 and doubling Ontario's electricity supply with renewables by 2040. We will prioritize investment in cost-effective renewable energy and energy efficiency effort as part of creating an efficient, flexible, and zero carbon electricity system. Our roadmap includes putting things in place like easy financing so that us in the community, you and I, can afford to retrofit our homes with more efficient electrical equipment to produce cheaper electricity and cleaner electricity. We will also look at targeting subsidies to help low-income families replace baseboard heaters with high-efficiency heat pumps. Bi-directional charging to bring costs down and meets the peaks of electricity, meaning that if we put solar powers and panels on our house, then if we have an excess and the grid requires excess, it takes from what we have and what we put in. And lastly, work with the indigenous peoples to site essential electrical transmission lines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Nicholas, please, your thoughts.
I would love to share them. The NDP has the strongest commitments to climate policy out of any major party. We have been let down by the Conservatives tremendously over the last 4 years. Ford is happy to give huge bailouts to his cronies, like with Highway 413, essentially a $10 billion giveaway to developers that is going to pay through greenlands and what should be protected green spaces. But I feel like I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, so I want to tell you guys what the NDP is going to do for energy production. For starters, we are going to have a net zero emissions vehicle strategy. This is going to bring manufacturing jobs right back here to Ontario. Our plan is to only sell zero emission cars by 2035 in this province, and all government cars, along with government contract vehicles, will be net zero emissions by 2030. And I also want to go back to our Green New Deal. This is a massive opportunity to invest in hydro, wind, solar, ocean hydropower, landfill gas, and municipal solid waste. These can change and be our primary energy sources. We are also running on a bold building retrofit program to make homes and buildings more energy cost efficient. We are going to provide rebates and interest-free loans to homeowners who want to have those green upgrades installed. And in terms of buildings, we are going to make sure buildings are more climate friendly in this province. We're going to do 5% of buildings in Ontario every single year until we're done, folks, until we have a green economy right here in Ontario, until we have a Green New Deal. And just our retrofit plan alone is going to create over 100,000 new jobs in this province. Again, these are going to be high-paying, high-skilled jobs that are going to pay the bills and support working families right here in Ontario.
Thank you, Nicholas. Jill, you have the floor.
Thank you. To help provide Ontarians with cleaner and cheaper electricity, we'll develop a long-term energy plan that refers to support conservative cuts to energy conservation programs and includes the right cost-effective mix of nuclear, hydroelectricity, and renewables. We'll renew the Ontario electricity rebate and transition as quickly as possible to a fully clean energy supply while maintaining reliability and affordability, including by banning new natural gas plants and phasing out our reliance on gas for baseload power. We'll also eliminate setup connection fees for rooftop solar, charging panels, and bidirectional electric vehicle charging. We'll pursue a green hydrogen generation, transportation and storage, and support businesses replacing carbon-emitting fuels with hydrogen.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the second part of the question, and we'll do it in the same order then again. So please, Riyad, Nicholas, and Jill. So the second part, and you have a minute for this, is to answer, how do you propose to supply the expected increase of electricity that will result from the electrification of our transportation systems? So, Riyad, go ahead.
Yeah, great question, actually. With all the new electric vehicles being put in place, we're definitely going to have a greater demand on the grid. We at Green Party are aiming to double Ontario's electricity supply with renewables by 2040. And how we're going to do this is by encourage off charging. So charging of your vehicles are off peak periods by giving lower rates. More houses with solar energy, less stress on the grid, ensuring that the electricity infrastructure that we presently have in place is operating efficiently. When you have an inefficient electrical system, you can tell at your house when the house wiring is not good and you put on the extra microwave, it blows a fuse. When your electrical system is not adequate, it takes away. So improving the infrastructure, the infrastructure for the electricity will definitely increase in terms of us being able to meet that demand for the extra power that's required to power these electrical vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicholas, please.
I don't know if anyone saw the Star article recently, but I'd like to bring some light to the Conservatives' plan. They are going all in on natural gas to generate electricity. This alone is going to increase emissions when creating electricity by 400% here in Ontario. That is unacceptable. That's not a plan that we can have. That's not a plan that is going to challenge the existential threat of climate change right now. The NDP thinks differently. We are going to increase our capacity for intermittent renewables like wind and solar, create more grid scale storage, increase rooftop solar capacity on buildings, and implement major grid connections with Quebec and Manitoba to enable electricity imports. We are going to stop the cancer of privatization, which the Liberal government inflicted on Ontario, that is to blame for the expensive private power contracts we have today. We must follow the example of the jurisdictions across Canada that have kept electricity prices low by focusing on delivering power at cost instead of for profit. Finally, the NDP, do I have time?
Are you now? You're out
Then
of time? All right.
I'll leave it at that. I have a lot more to say later.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
As mentioned before, we'll pursue green hydrogen to help expand the grid, but we also recognize that nuclear is a key part of the emission reduction strategy here in Ontario, where we need to be able to rely on a steady supply of energy with our harsh climate. Nuclear is zero emission if it has a small footprint, but we will also continue to grow renewables, including wind, solar, and hydro. There's really interesting research being done right here in Mississauga on small modular reactors. That's a technology that will enable us to power small communities of tens of thousands of homes. It helps to prevent the loss of a lot of electricity in the delivery, and that's one of the places where it's a real challenge, and it's something that increases the cost of delivery of power to some of the smaller communities, particularly in Northern Ontario. So this is good technology that we need to be pursuing, but of course, this is only one piece of the puzzle, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are moving away from natural gas and focusing on renewables.
Thank you very much. So lots to think about there. Anybody want to exercise a wild card yet? Just let me know. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to the third question, and we're switching gears a little bit, but not totally. We're going to talk about youth. So this question is a single question, and we will give you 2 minutes to answer. And the order in which we will take this question will be Jill, then Nicholas, then Riyadh. Okay. And the question is, future opportunities for our youth are dependent on leaving the environment in better shape than it is today. Youth-led climate movements across Ontario have drawn attention to these demands with marches, trees plantings, and cleanups taking place in Toronto, Kingston, London, and Sudbury, just to name a few. How will your party's climate change plans listen to and reflect the priorities, desires, and efforts of youth? How will you inspire youth and the rest of us to take an active part in the green just transition? So take it away, Jill.
So I love and hate this question because my first real introduction to politics actually came when I was in high school. I didn't grow up in a political family. I came from the kind of family where you didn't talk about politics. You didn't ask people who they voted for. I lived in a small town called Port Elgin, about a half hour away from a town called Walkerton. Now, anyone who's about my age or older is going to know exactly what Walkerton means, but I know I have members of my team who just sort of blink at me when I reference it. So I'm going to explain it. 22 years ago, for the May long weekend, because of cuts to oversight in public health in the small town of Walkerton, Ontario, the water was poisoned by E. coli. And nobody knew what was happening until half the town got sick, about 2,300 people. And then, nobody knew what was happening. Everyone just got really sick, and then people started dying. And it was really scary, and it was all because we had failed to take care of of what's most important. That's making sure that we're prioritizing people's health and the environmental controls that protect us. So when I look now at my team, I have high school students, I have university students, I have teachers, I have people who are out there working with me all the time, and they are motivated and they understand what we're dealing with, because now we have a government again that is failing to prioritize their health, their well-being, and their future. As we see a government that is planning to pave through the green belts and farmland that we can't unpave. As we see them using MZOs to build within these areas that are floodplains and continuing to cause more damage without any real thought to the environmental impact. So here we are at the university tonight. I think this is the perfect place to be talking about this. We have a lot of work to do, but I have no concerns about making sure that we have the youth of today involved in what we are building for, because they are going to feel it more than the rest of us, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences longer. So they are here, they're engaged, and we're going to keep going together. And I'm out of time.
Thank you. Okay, Nicholas, you have 2 minutes.
When I look at the youth of Ontario, you guys are pissed off. And honestly, I'm happy about it, because you see the problems that are right ahead of us. You see that climate change is an existential threat. You notice that wages are too low, that housing is sky high. There is a terribly uncertain future ahead of you. And to be frank, the policies of the Liberals and the Conservative governments aren't going to cut it this time. They're not going to mobilize the youth to do what needs to be done right now to protect us from climate change. And it's inspiring to see the way in which students and youth, instead of sinking into despondency like so many adults, have risen up all around the world to fight for the future of our planet in the face of the warning signs. They are investing their energy into direct action and political struggle that will ensure they inherit a habitable world. We want to channel those energies into our climate strategy. That's why the NDP is creating a first of its kind youth climate corps that's going to give young Ontarians the opportunity to get hands-on skills and experience restoring and enhancing Ontario's natural landscape while earning a fair wage and even getting credits in your post-secondary education. We have to inspire young Canadians, and we're going to form a coalition of workers, students, youth, and industry that is committed and ready to do what is necessary to avert climate catastrophe. Just like the COVID-19 pandemic, this solution to this crisis is international. Where Trudeau's Liberals back down, we will step up and meet the targets stipulated by the Paris Accords. All the world's youth want to save the planet. We need to govern in a way that actually stays true to that desire.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. So, yeah.
Thank you. If I understand the question correctly, it's about how we're going to inspire youths and the rest of us to take an active part in the green transition. And, you know, green is what we, the Green Party, was built on, right? How are we going to transition our youths? And it is a huge problem. With the development of these electronic games, a lot of youths are now staying indoors. They're staying indoors and they're playing it. They'd rather stay indoors and play a game of basketball online rather than go outside. So a proper plan needs to be put in place to encourage these youths to come out and be part of this transition to a greener environment and to protect our climate. And how we intend to do this is through education and public awareness programs, because not only on the youths, but even some adults don't even believe that there's an issue with climate. That needs to be addressed as well. And therefore, we need a proper education and public awareness plan. Part of this plan will include things like competitions through art, encouraging people to come out to the youth to take part in competitions that gives them prizes, and at the same time making them aware of what's happening when it comes to the environment. Other incentives such as scholarships, so that the young people, and not just the young people, but people who want to transition from one job to the next, encourage those people to transition into a job that will help the environment. Put programs in place to do that, offer scholarships, offer incentives, offer training, so that we can transition these youths and inspire them, as well as people who are looking to maybe change jobs, to a job that can help in terms of the environment. And work and offer incentives to community groups so that they can create and maintain green spaces, offer competition, who can have the best green space or the green square in your town or your community. And we set up a competition, encouraging people to do that. And lastly, and most importantly, we will do all of this with the voice of the youths, bringing them in as part of this so that their voice is heard and they're the ones spearheading this project. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks very much for the candidates. Oh, okay, we have a wild card, please. Go for it, Jill.
I just wanted to say we have absolutely no trouble inspiring the youths of our region here in Mississauga-Streetsville to come and join us in the Liberal Party. I have volunteers on my team and who are our neighbors who are starting walkouts, who are speaking at May Day rallies, who are on the news almost every day, talking about what they've been going through for the last 2 years, for the last 4 years, their experiences with this government, how their families and their communities are being affected. And they're not looking for talk, they're looking for action. They want real plans. And when they look at the Liberal Party, they see that we don't just care, we're not just talking about it, we are ready with real tangible plans that are feasible, that are costed, that we know that we can get done. They are fighting for their health, for their lives, for their futures, and they are out with us all the time, knocking on doors, standing up for themselves. And I am so, so proud of each and every one of them who are out with us all the time. They know what's at stake and they are fighting.
Thank you very much, Jill. And thanks to all the candidates for sticking to the format of the debate really well. You're staying on time with your messages, and that's wonderful. I did want to remind the audience members, whether you're watching online or whether you are sitting here with us, to pose your questions, because I think we're all staying on time, on track. So I think there will be time for questions. And if you are in the audience here, if our volunteers could raise their hands here, and so if all you need to do is make your little piece of paper, get it down to the volunteers, and we'll get it up here. Or if you are online, drop it in the chat. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to, we're going to be talking now a little bit about waste management, toxics, and resources. This is a question, it's a one-parter. Each candidate is going to have 1 minute to address this question.
Oh, geez.
Which isn't a lot to address. Yes, it's 1 minute for this.
Monica, it's going to take longer to read the question than for each of us to
It
answer.
might be. We'll see how we do. Okay, and you'll have the opportunity. This might be a good wild card exercise. Okay, so the question here reads, what measures would your government take to rapidly reduce plastic use and waste generation in Ontario? How would you advance a sustainable and circular economy where materials are repurposed, remanufactured, and reused to avoid waste and new resource extraction? For example, battery waste from electric vehicles. All right, and where the order we're taking this is Nicholas, Brad, and Jill. So Nicholas, take it away.
Okay, I'm gonna make this incredibly brief. I'm not, and here I am taking my sweet time. I'm not necessarily a fan of the framing of the question. I think it puts a lot of onus on individuals. And you know, when I see people in Mississauga and all over Ontario, they do their part. They are composting, they're recycling, they are making sure things are separated, they are buying zero-emission vehicles. But the root of the problem is in the corporations, these massive polluters who are getting away with destroying our ecosystem, all for the sake of corporate profit. We have to end privatization when it comes to anything climate related. That's why I was so disappointed, and I'm sure many Ontarians were, when the Liberal Party privatized Hydro One. They sent our hydro rates skyrocketing up 12%. Doug Ford continued that trend, they're up another 4%. This is unacceptable. We need to tackle waste in a way that combats the biggest polluters first. And carbon tax is just not going to cut it.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicholas. Brad.
Great, thank you. So our roadmap is set out to deal with this topic. It's about establishing higher standards for air and water pollution in areas where vulnerable communities are exposed to cumulative health risk with multiple industries. Improving environmental equity mapping and use it in pollution permitting decisions. Increase things like real-time air monitoring so that we are alerted when the air quality is not as good or it's deprived, it's decreased. how are we going to do some of these things in addition to this is we plan to ban things like single-use plastics such as straws, because the whole intention here is to clean up our environment from things like waste, toxics, and really get those plastics out of it. Ban unnecessarily single-use things like straws and plastics, and of course, set durability standards so that goods are designed to last. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jill, you have a question.
Okay. To help, we'll divert and recycle 60% of waste from landfills by 2030 and 85% by 2050. We'll update ineffective waste management and recycling in industrial and commercial sectors and hold polluters accountable for their waste. We'll also expand the list of products that can be recycled in blue bins and implement a landfill ban for food and organic waste, requiring green bin programs to work with farmers and fuel producers to harness organic waste for renewable natural gas and reduce methane emissions. Finally, we'll prevent plastic products from becoming pollution in the first place by restricting certain harmful single-use products, establishing strong standards for plastics, including how much has to be recycled content, and encouraging businesses to use packaging made from biomass-based polymers.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Does anyone want to keep going with this topic? Use a wild card for this one, or?
Soon.
Soon,
Not-
all right. Okay. So moving on to a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, relates to water. So this one, you'll have a little bit more time to a little more fulsome responses. It's one question. You have 2 minutes each. And the order in which we're going to address this is Riyadh, Jill, and then Nicholas. Okay, so this question says, approximately 1/5 of the world's fresh water lies within the Great Lakes, much of it adjacent to Ontario's borders. Increasingly, freshwater supplies in Ontario have become impacted by pollution from road salt, pesticides, chemicals, fertilizer, and invasive species that threatens the water from which Ontarians benefit. What are your party's plans to protect Ontario's water resources? What alternatives to these chemical inputs would your party consider, such as those seen in the LDB Mod Control Program? Okay, so yeah, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So first I want to say that we at the Green Party endorse source to tap approach to protecting water quality and providing better water for us to drink. We will restore the provincial water source by looking at the Clean Water Act and cleaning it up, restoring the provincial funding under the Clean Water Act, and expand those drinking water resource protection to the northern, remote, and indigenous communities. We will properly control water takings to protect the community supplies. And we will keep the pollution out of water by updating and enforcing standards for major sources of pollutants, including sewer overflows, persistent toxic substances from industry and consumers, manure, fertilizers, and pesticides from agriculture and cities, road salt, plastic microbeads, microfibers, and lead. And we are committed to putting forward $1 billion for the indigenous climate leadership, including respecting indigenous protected and conserved areas, which to help the indigenous community to protect the huge intact watershed in the Far North. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jill.
As I mentioned before, water is a big concern for me. When we're looking at the way that things are developing here in Mississauga and our surrounding area, I'm very concerned about the 413 and the way that we are continuing to build this province without real concern for the impacts on our province as a whole and surrounding communities. We know that the 413 is going to have devastating environmental impacts, not just on the immediate area as it's going to go through the green belt. It won't, we're elected on June 2nd because we will cancel it immediately. But if it were to go through, it would affect our watershed right here in Mississauga for the Credit River. We cannot allow this because that would, it would be devastating, not just for our community, but for so many who will be affected by that direct route. We cannot have developments that proceed with MZOs. We know that this has been used far too often under the current government, more than 60 times in the last 4 years. There's no value in moving forward on development without making sure that it follows the proper environmental assessments to make sure that we are not going to be causing damage that we cannot do later. We can't unpave land. We can't fix the water once we have done this damage in many places. So right here in our riding too, I know we've heard a lot of concerns about the development going in along Old Dairy Road in Barbertown. We know that there are going to be some issues there. So it's about making sure that we are doing things properly, not moving forward with processes like the MZO, and which we would cancel as a party, we would no longer use that. And again, when we are looking forward to the future, we would expand the green belt, make sure that we're protecting more land, taking care of this very precious environment that we know is vital to the future of this province. We would also create 5 more provincial parks to make sure that we are doing more, not just for the current state of Ontario, but for the future also.
Thank you very much. And so Nicholas.
First and foremost, we must guarantee clean water as a basic human right. For all their high-minded talk of reconciliation, the Liberals and their ample federal mandate have failed to deliver clean drinking water to Indigenous communities. Indigenous resistance was met with litigation and militarized police of the Liberal government. We're supposed to be dealing with Indigenous communities on a nation-to-nation basis. Instead, those Liberals dealt with First Nations like an imperial power. As a child of Palestinian immigrants, I can sympathize with the situation of Indigenous people in Canada in today's day and age. For decades, both Liberal and Conservative governments had ignored the urgency of climate change, protected big polluters, and removed protections out of our air and water. Why should we have any confidence that they'll change course from their lackluster policies? We'll launch a provincial strategy based on public interest and guarantee public accessible access to sustainable water resources. This also means ensuring water protection plans are implemented so everyone has access to reliable, safe drinking water. This means ensuring water protections. We're going to put an end to boil water advisories in Ontario for good and forever, and do here what Trudeau promised he would do 6 years ago and didn't. The case of Grassy Narrows exemplifies what is happening in more than 100 First Nations communities with no access to safe drinking water. All life dependent on the river in this community was poisoned by a pulp and paper mill, and people got deathly ill. Fish died. Fishers lost their livelihoods. People suffered from cancer, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. The Liberal government deciding to purchase a pipeline for more money than it would cost to fix the water advisories shows its callousness to the suffering of regular people and shows where their priorities are on these issues. The NDP will bring climate justice to people in Grassy Narrows by cleaning up the enormous mercury in the Wabamun River system and take immediate action to pick up that mercury buried upstream.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think we'll have a chance.
I wanted to use my wild card as well.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think Jill's going for her wild card, and then we'll give.
No, you can let him continue and he can
Oh,
finish
yeah,
his wild
actually,
card
we'd
if he
like
wants to finish a statement, and I'll go after.
We'll be revisiting the boil water advisories in another question, so it's up to you whether you want to do this now or not.
You know what? Why not both? I'd like to use it here too. I was shocked to hear in Jill's answer the boil water advisories and Grassy Narrows didn't come up once. These are literally people in Indigenous communities who do not have access to safe, clean drinking water. Guys, this is the most fundamental, basic human right, and they are suffering every single day. And we have a government, federally and provincially, that is refusing to invest. I just read the stat earlier. The cost of the pipeline that they rammed through Indigenous territory in Wet'suwet'en cost more than what it would take to make sure drinking water was safe in Indigenous territories. We can do so much better. We have to have a government who's going to step up and address this issue. It is literally a case of life and death, and the Liberals have let us down every single step of the way. Let's call a spade a spade.
Jill, you'd like to rebut that?
I would, yeah, thank you. With respect to my fellow candidate, I just think we should clarify right now that this is the Ontario provincial election. This is not a federal election. The Prime Minister is not running on June 2nd, so I think that we do need to recognize that we have a certain number of issues that are taking place in Ontario. If we do want to fight about the federal election, I believe there's another one coming up in 2025. But if we want to talk about things like Wet'suwet'en and BC, there is an NDP government that is governing there, so we can have that conversation, right? It's not, there's no one party that owns these issues. Water is an issue for me. We do have another conversation coming up, another question coming up shortly on water reconciliation. We can keep talking about it, I think we should. But no single answer when we're, let's be honest, answering questions in 1 or 2 minutes is going to hit every single point. You know, if I'm not mentioning every single thing, every answer, it's not because I don't care about it. It's because I can't answer everything in these questions. But yes, Ontario election, June 2nd. Let's talk about that one. And right now it is Doug Ford who is leading this province. And we need to be making sure that we're doing everything that we can to do better for this province. And here in Mississauga-Streetsville, I am ready to fight for us here, and I am your option.
Can I use another one?
Not right now. We're gonna, if you want to stay on this topic, we will be coming up again. So did you want to just hold that for a second?
I'll hold my.
Oh, you know what? I have a water bottle too.
Oh,
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Yeah. Nicholas, what's your preference? Do you want to address this now or we just are coming back to talk about it?
Am I allowed to quickly address it?
Sure. Why don't you give me take 30 seconds?
I'd just like to say that there are things going on. The boil water advisories are in Ontario right now. There is mercury in grassy narrows right now that is poisoning people. And I'm simply making the point that whether it is federal liberals or provincial liberals, there has been a clear lack of attention paid to Indigenous communities and their water supply, and something has to change. The NDP is going to step up and change that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, please hold your applause. Thank you. All right, and we will have an opportunity to revisit this issue. But we're going to talk about something else that I think is also on mind. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, did you have a,
Yes.
you want to use your own card?
I was able to answer the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I thought I was doing so well. Did you not have your first? Did you not?
No,
On this one?
Yes,
Oh,
you
my
did.
goodness.
Yes, you did. You were first in this one.
That's good.
but I didn't respond. He went first.
Okay, I apologize.
We have a recording.
Yes, no, I believe you. I believe you. Go ahead, please. You have
You're
you have your 2
biased
minutes.
against me, it's fine, but anyway.
You have your 2 minutes.
Yeah. So my first point that I want to make is that the topic here we're talking about is, just to remind everyone, it's about rising cost of living and accessing affordable and adequate housing. Not
That's
about-
the
Oh,
next
sorry,
question.
hold on, we're still
That's the
on
next
water
question.
Oh.
We're just wrapping up the water, so
Oh,
now.
sorry,
Okay, so I haven't lost my mind.
We
here.
got
Okay.
really stalled there.
No, but that's what you read.
No,
I haven't read it yet.
We were still on water.
Can we ask for the audience to?
Yeah, still on.
Still on water.
My apologies.
That's okay. We have a little hiccup. No, baby. Okay. So yes, okay. We have wrapped up water for the time being. We will revisit it in an upcoming question, but now we're going to talk about housing. Okay. So this is, it's a single question. It's 2 minutes. The order in which we're going to go is Nicholas, Jill, and Brianna. Oh, yeah, I know you're chomping at the bit, but we will give you your opportunity. And now I'm going to read this one. So related to housing and the rising cost of living. More and more Ontarians are worried about inflation and the rising cost of living, particularly in regards to housing. Climate change is aggravating affordability issues by impacting food supply, challenging our infrastructure, and so on. How would your party mitigate the rising cost of living and ensure that all Ontarians have access to affordable, adequate housing? Okay, and our order here is Nicholas, and then Jill, and then Brianna. Okay.
This is a big one, folks, so bear with me. This question addresses precisely what we should be talking about when it comes to the true cost of the climate crisis. Ontarians are living in unprecedentedly difficult times. They are facing rising costs of gas, housing, groceries, and other bills needed to make ends meet. This, in addition to the skyrocketing hydro costs caused by the wind government's decision to privatize Hydro One, turning yet another essential service into a profit-making scheme where wealthy investors parasitically leech off ordinary people. This is why the economy and climate are inseparable. They are global issues which must be addressed through a democracy with not only political, but economic and social rights. One of those rights is the right to quality housing for all. Doug Ford defends his wealthy developers and billionaire investor buddies at all costs. He canceled rent control on new units and allowed renovations to run rampant. He refused to give tenants direct relief during the pandemic and abandoned Ontario's target of ending homelessness by 2025. The Liberals claim that the housing problem is one of supply. In fact, in this respect, they mirror the Conservative talking points on housing, which blames red tape for preventing the boundless construction that could lower prices. if we only coach developers with lax regulation and taxpayer-funded subsidies. The framing of this issue is a bold-faced lie. In the GTA alone, there are nearly 100,000 empty homes, enough housing for 240,000 people. The statistic is based, I'm running out of time here. The statistic is based on landlords' own self-reported data, so we can expect this number is low on the estimate. A shocking 70% of Canadian household debt is real estate debt, $1.436 trillion. The Liberals have had 15 years to fix the affordable housing crisis, but chose not to. They left massive loopholes in the non-resident speculation tax that allowed foreign corporations and billionaires to speculate on Ontario real estate at the expense of regular families, pricing us out of the market.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to Jill.
Okay. Okay, this absolutely is a massive topic. We're hearing it constantly at the door. People are really struggling right now, especially here in Mississauga, but really it is a problem right across Ontario. We have seen cost of living has been rising, it's been outpacing compensation. We know that people are really struggling to find housing, whether it's trying to get into the housing market, whether they're trying to look to downsize, whether they're trying to find a home that fits them better, or for renters. And I was a renter for a very long time before we were able to purchase our first home. And it was only by luck that we were able to get in at the point that we did. It should not be that way. It's just too hard right now. So we recognize that making sure that we are making housing affordable is absolutely priority. And in the context of this specific conversation, making sure that we're doing it with climate change in mind, we have to recognize that we are specifically here in Mississauga-Streetsville. Well, we're in Aramill here tonight, but we're having our ride in Streetsville. We do have limited space. We can't continue to sprawl. We can't just keep building highways, rolling out, and we live in what's called the Yellow Belt. We have a lot of single-family dwellings. We have a lot of space that's just sort of being taken up. We can't keep doing that. We have to recognize that we have to improve the way that we are building the density. We have to look at the missing middle. We have a lot of single-family dwellings and high rises, but we're not making use of the space that we can for townhouses, duplexes, low-rise condos. Finding those different options that are going to work better for our communities and allow people to get into the market. But at the same time, we can't just build these communities and expect them to work without making sure that the infrastructure is there to match it. That means that we need transit so that people can afford and make a decision to leave their cars at home. Part of our plan is to make sure that we have dollar ride transit right across Ontario. And that's going to make such a huge difference for so many people. I only started driving at 28 because I never needed to take a car until I moved to Mississauga. I would love to make it so much easier for my kids to be able to make that choice instead of getting older, and to make it more affordable for people right here in the city, whether it's the bus, the GO train, when they get to the subway right downtown Toronto, to make those decisions so that they don't have to take their vehicles. I'm out of time.
Thank you very much. Okay, Riyadh, please. There you go.
Thank you. So yes, when it comes to affordable housing and adequate living, increasing or rising cost of living, certainly a big issue, a huge issue. And it's not just the rising cost of living, the rate at which it's increasing, right? We're seeing that prices literally over a month, price of gas went up almost 5 times or 4 times. But the point is that we in the Green Party, how are we going to address these things? Everybody is looking at interest rates are increasing 5 bips, every other month or every time there's an announcement. But I'm not seeing anybody asking the question how high they expect it to go and where will it land. And there's so many people out there who are on mortgages right now that if interest rates gets to 17 and 18% or 19%, what are we going to do? And therefore, we as the Green Party are thinking about these things and seeing the impact about it. And we have a plan basically in terms of how we're going to address this. One is build 160,000 new permanently affordable rental homes over the next decade. Create seed funding of 100 million for cooperative housing to direct funding and mortgage support. Renew 260 community housing units over the next decade in partnership with the federal government under the National Housing Strategy. Extend financial support to 311,000 Ontario households via portable housing benefit, and provide non-profit housing providers with the support and access to capital needed to buy rental buildings to maintain affordability permanently and explore preemptive right to buy for nonprofit. Partner with nonprofits and corporates, community land trusts, to take every opportunity to utilize public land for permanently affordable rental housing and attainable home ownership options through low-term lease. And lastly, implement programs like rent to own so that people can afford more housing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, anybody wish to, yeah, you want to go for it? Please, Nicholas, you have a minute.
This question is about affordability, and the Liberals had 14 years in power, folks. Make life affordable. Instead, they let housing costs soar. They increased hundreds of percent under the Liberal government, pricing regular folks out of the market. They privatized Hydro One. We all felt that. That was a 12% increase to hydro rates for everyone in Ontario. And with their carbon tax, let's be real, they passed the burden of increasing prices onto the consumer. 80% of those carbon tax emissions that were supposed to be taxed have left untaxed through loopholes. We were getting price gouged in auto insurance, and even now, they're not even running on a living wage. They are legislating people into poverty. No one should be working 40 hours a week and not make a job and not have a job that pays all the bills. How much time do I have? Oh God, I wanted to get into our affordable housing plan a bit, but I encourage anyone to talk to me after. We have an excellent plan to make life more affordable, and that'll actually address the systemic problems in housing in Ontario.
And thank you. And I'll just remind you that you will have an opportunity for some concluding remarks as well. Brad, do you want to, or you're going to exercise? You're ready to move on? Okay, wonderful. All right. So now we're going to talk about reconciliation. So this will give us a little bit of opportunity to come back to some issues that we've already discussed. And again, this is a two-parter. So you have a minute to answer this first question, and the order in which this question will be answered is Jill, then Rhea, then Nicholas. And this question says, Ontario has one of the highest numbers of boil water advisories, as we talked about, in all provinces in Canada. Will you address the lack of potable water access for Indigenous communities, and what is your plan for doing so? So please, Jill, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciate this question. We'll work closely with Indigenous, federal, and municipal partners to end all boil water advisories in all First Nations and Northern communities in Ontario, making necessary investments in water infrastructure, operations, and maintenance where needed. We'll protect and restore Ontario's rivers, wetlands, and watersheds, including Moose Cree First Nation and Kishinev. I actually can't pronounce this one. I'm so sorry. Kishinev Inuit. We'll also streamline the process to the federal government through which land is added to First Nations reserves. Look, we have a lot of work to do here, and I'm not going to pretend that this hasn't been done properly throughout years and decades at any level of government by any government right across this country. There is a lot of work that has to happen, and it has to be done with all three levels of government and with the communities who are at play. And I wish that there were a simple solution in every single community that continues to deal with some of these very long-term advisories. It's hard. These are big problems and communities are really suffering, but that doesn't mean that they are not worth the time and the effort. And I wish that we were already past all of this. There's been a great deal of work that has happened, but it's not done yet, and that's not good enough. I'm just gonna talk for another second here. This has been far too hard. I have seen in my own community growing up what the impact is when people are poisoned by their water. It's something that is deeply personal for me, and it's something that I will fight for as your MVP in Mississauga-Streetsville, and I will hold my own party to it.
Thank you, Jill. Rhea.
Thank you. The Green Party's position has always been that every person in Canada should have access to safe, affordable drinking water. And this is the basic fundamental right of everyone living, not just here in Canada, but across the world. This is a fundamental right. 40 First Nation communities still don't have access to potable water. In this country, as wealthy as Canada, this is unthinkable. What we plan in terms of us and our programs to help them is to partner with government, nonprofit and NGOs who already embarked on this project. For example, an example of this would be First Water. First Water have already embarked on a project where they're working with the Indigenous communities, training them on maintaining and operating water plants, how to test their own water, to understand the quality of it, work with organizations like them to put things in place so that we can get rid of this problem, because it's a fundamental right. And this is certainly something that's unacceptable and unthinkable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to stay with this theme.
Oh, I still got
Sorry, I'm really losing my breath here. Go for it.
No, it's totally okay. There are currently 33 long-term water advisories on reserves. That means the water is not consumable unless you boil it beforehand. I'd just like to bring attention today again, we shouldn't even be talking about this. The federal Liberals had an opportunity to end this discussion. Instead, they chose to focus on a $12.4 billion pipeline that they rammed through Indigenous territories, supposed to be protected land, and the boil water, clean water could have been given to Indigenous communities for just $3.2 billion. I don't want to mince words here. We are going to end the boil water advisories in Indigenous communities if you elect an NDP government. More than that, we are going to get the mercury out of the Walloon River in Grassy Narrows. These people need help right now. And now the Liberals are here and they're talking about reconciliation. And I'm genuinely wondering, how can we possibly believe them when they had 15 years to fix these issues? And instead, Indigenous people were drinking poisoned water and having the Liberal government use military force to silence them. It's unacceptable. Something has to change. We need an Indigenous plan right here in Ontario to partner with the communities and have a real strategy for Indigenous folks to bring reconciliation to their communities.
Okay, we'll have an opportunity. Thank you, Nicholas. I'm sorry that I almost didn't give you a chance to speak there, but we do have an opportunity to expand a little bit on this idea with the second part of this. To reconciliation. And this question states, negative environmental impacts that cause the loss of ecosystem services are especially harsh on Indigenous and ethnic communities, as well as the poor and the homeless. What needs to happen to reverse this trend, and what will you and your party do to minimize these societal impacts and create a more just transition? So we're now changing the order a little bit here. So there's 2 minutes to answer this. We're going to start with Riyadh, and then Nicholas, and then Jill. So please take it away.
Great, thank you. Ontario Greens support the right of the Indigenous people to determine and develop priorities and strategies for exercising their rights, including the right to conservation and the protection of the environment and the productive capacity of their territories. We will advocate for the Indigenous communities by acknowledging and committing to addressing disproportionately violent and discriminatory law enforcement experienced by the Indigenous. Fully fund the Anti-Racism Directorate, reversing the recent cuts. Work with the federal government to implement the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Require training on racism and discrimination for healthcare workers, educators, public employees, and legislators. Reforming child welfare and protection services to address the overrepresentation of the Indigenous children in provincial care by ensuring the Indigenous communities are served by Indigenous-led providers. Working with the federal government to identify and close the gap in the health outcomes between Indigenous and the non-Indigenous communities. Increasing the number of Indigenous-led health centers, youth programs, crisis support teams, and supporting suicide prevention training. Providing properly funded Indigenous-led support for survivors of the residential school trauma. And lastly, funding 22,000 Indigenous-owned and operated permanent homes under an urban and rural Indigenous housing strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicholas.
We must first respect Indigenous people's right to self-determination and allow them to have a democratic say in their relation to Canada and its government. Instead, Trudeau's Liberals have dealt with First Nations people like an imperial power. When we deliver on housing, healthcare, education, and environmental protections as guarantees to all Ontarians, we do not fall into the means testing trap so common in my opponent's platforms that ends up letting the most marginalized communities slip through the cracks of an unwieldy bureaucracy. We have to tackle corporate power and place the essential sectors of the economy in the hands of workers and regular people, not profit-hungry boards of directors. A party that trusts regular people over corporations is the only one that can achieve the goals we all want. $18 billion handed out and environmental subsidies have done nothing to curb emissions, and there's no reason to believe that the current strategy of giving large stacks of cash to private companies is going to do anything to address the climate crisis. Why don't we make the transition a worker one first instead? Why don't we make investments in the large-scale transition to a green economy that will directly benefit workers with high-paying jobs right now? That is what the NDP is proposing.
Thank you very much. Jill?
Thank you. I hate to say it again. This is the Ontario provincial election. It is not the federal election. I don't believe that Justin Trudeau and his government are running it this way. I also don't believe that this is the British Columbia provincial election, so I don't think we're talking about their NDP party or the decisions that they have made out there. So I would like to talk to you about what we would do as the Ontario Liberal Party after we're elected on June 2nd. We are running against Doug Ford's government, and we have the chance to actually make real differences here in our province. So let's talk about that today. Now, this is a great question. I don't want to repeat myself entirely after the conversation that we just had before, but I would like to talk about part of this question here. As we see the cost of living rising, and we have mentioned here about people who are marginalized, people who have been most affected by all these changes that we've been suffering through. It is people who are marginalized. It is our Indigenous communities. It is people who live under the poverty line, people who are just earning a lower income. And I can't help but think about my mom. I was raised by a single mom in rural Ontario who made ends meet waitressing and working retail. Today, you're still going to find her working in a small grocery store, and nobody is getting rich working in a small grocery store. She does everything she can to make ends meet, and she's a wonderful person. And today, I still see every problem that we face here in Ontario through her eyes. And she is the lens that I carry with me everywhere that I go. It has been a very hard time through this last 2 years and this last 4 years. And we have a lot of work to do in so many areas, whether it's the environment, whether it's healthcare, whether it's school for our kids, making sure that we are taking care of the people of this province and not leaving anybody behind. There's a lot of work to do. And I'm so grateful for the example that she set for me and the perspective that she's given me throughout my life. I don't know why we keep changing topic and talking about a completely different government. I hope we stay focused and we recognize that we have a government right now with Doug Ford who does not care about any of us and is plowing through and knocking out all of the supports that have given us so much in this province. Let's stay focused on that.
Great, thank you very much. So we're moving on to, oh, please go ahead, Nicholas. You have a minute.
Folks, I'll tell you why I'm bringing up the federal government, and I can see some folks in the audience, Jill's team, kind of be like, well, why is he doing that? Well, because the federal government and the provincial government have been one and the same on this issue, haven't they? They have implemented, the boil water advisories are still in place. Grassy Narrows still has mercury in the water. People in Indigenous communities in Ontario do not have access to the health care that they need, to the mental health care that they need, to the high quality jobs, to the education. There is a deep problem in our Indigenous communities right now that is going unaddressed on a provincial and federal level. They are absolutely one and the same on this issue. So how can we possibly trust that you will do anything to support the Indigenous communities when we have seen how they've not only been treated on a federal level, but a provincial level? And I object to the framing that these are not interconnected.
Jill,
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I don't have my phone with me. I left it back there because my phone never stops these days. So I can't look up to see how many of the boil water advisories have actually been addressed over the last 7 years. There's work getting done there. It should be done. I wish it was done. I'm not going to sit here and apologize for the amount of work that is left to be finished. So I'm not going to pretend that any level of government has done enough on this issue. I think I've already said that tonight. This is a deep, deep issue that I care very personally about, as I said, because I have seen with my own eyes what happens when we fail to protect water in communities. So I'm not here to pretend that anyone has done it well, and I'm not going to make excuses about it. I also have never been part of the previous Liberal government. This is my first time running. I am someone who is here because I am raising my family in this community, and we have been affected throughout my entire life by decisions made at Queen's Park. So I understand how important it is that we get this right. I'm not here for a title. I'm not here to cut ribbons. I'm here because the work matters, and I know how important it is. And I'm going to keep fighting whatever happens on June 2nd, but I'm going to be much more effective for you from Queen's Park. So when we get to June 2nd, we have two possible outcomes. I hope that you're going to be ready to elect me and make sure that we can actually make a difference.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, we're going to move on to our last question unless we're good. So our final question kind of ties together quite a few themes here. So it relates to healthcare accessibility. And so again, single question here, 2 minutes. Riyadh, you're going to go first, Nicholas, and then Jill. And the question reads this way. The COVID-19 pandemic has called greater attention to many sources of stress in Ontario's healthcare system, such as understaffing, a lack of culturally relevant services, and long wait times. Climate change will further challenge these systems, driving an increase in heat-related illness, respiratory, and infectious diseases. If elected, how will you and your party work to make healthcare more accessible for all Ontarians while reducing the burden on our healthcare workers? So please take it away. Yeah.
Thank you. Our plan is a robust system of primary care, mainly supporting a publicly funded, publicly delivered healthcare system and opposing further privatization of care. Expanding access to family health teams in communities across the province and expanding opportunities for physicians to join team-based models of care. Expanding access to non-urgent care within 24 hours, 7 days a week. By expanding primary care models such as community health centers and doubling the number of clinics led by nurse practitioners. Improving integration and connectivity across the healthcare service providers through the use of digital data sharing and patient health coordinators. Improving diagnosis and OHP or OHIP covered comprehensive care for rare and or invisible diseases, including but not limited to Lyme disease, long COVID and chronic pain disorders. Increasing funding for and access to midwives and other community prenatal care services across Ontario. Mental health care, big, and that's a huge thing for us when it comes to mental health care. We have a plan to put affordable, accessible, and comprehensive healthcare, when it comes to healthcare, to put affordable, accessible, and comprehensive, and is designed so that everyone in this province can get the care that we need. Ontario Greens will treat addiction as a public health issue. We will work with the federal government to fast track the decriminalization of drugs and relocate funding from the justice system to mental health care services. Establish mental health focused crisis response teams to communicate across Ontario to be deployed when people are experiencing mental health or substance abuse related issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Nicholas, your thoughts. Thank you.
It's okay.
Did you go?
No, I didn't go yet, but I think it's fine. Yeah, it's all in whatever order.
Yeah, I think you're next on my list. Do I
Oh,
have that
perfect.
correct?
I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, I am excited to announce, honestly, that we have by far the most comprehensive platform on healthcare. The NDP is guaranteeing dental to every single person in Ontario, mental health coverage to every single person in Ontario, and universal prescription drug coverage to every single person in Ontario. This would be huge. It would guarantee the idea that I'm sure 99% of us feel that healthcare is a human right, but our healthcare needs, they've gone unaddressed for the last 14 years. Before Doug Ford was slashing public health units from 35 to 10, before Doug Ford was cutting nurses' wages on Bill 124, I want to remind you that the Freudian slip, that the provincial Liberals froze hospital budgets, which led to hallway medicine, made it run rampant, increased surgical backlogs, and of course they laid off 1,600 nurses right here in Ontario. That's not how you fight for healthcare heroes. I want to talk about our nurse strategy, by the way. We are going to immediately repeal Bill 124. Nurses should be making good wages. They have been through so much during the pandemic. They deserve at least the dignity of making a living wage. We are going to hire 10,000 personal service workers that are urgently needed and give them a $5 permanent raise above pre-pandemic levels. We are going to hire 30,000 nurses to fill the urgently needed gap right now and make sure that these jobs people want to flock to again. We need to make nursing a fantastic profession in Ontario again with high wages and good benefits. That's how we're going to attract people back to this profession right here. And we are actually going to fund our hospital system, get rid of the surgical backlog, and make sure that hallway medicine is a thing of the past right here in Ontario. We cannot simply take it in good faith that the Liberals are going to step up and fix this issue when they had 14 years to solve it, and people are still not getting their healthcare needs addressed in Ontario. It is of critical importance, especially while we are coming off of the COVID-19 pandemic, a public health crisis.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Jill.
Okay, a question that's very near and dear to my heart, especially when we're talking about infectious disease. But first of all, happy nursing week to anyone who is a nurse who might be watching tonight. Nurses have been with me during the best and the worst days of my life, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am. They are, we have to do a much better job caring for the people who care for us in Ontario, from nurses to PSWs to the people who are behind the scenes in our healthcare system who have not been properly compensated during this current government. We would repeal Bill 124 immediately. We have to be doing a much better job caring for our healthcare and human resources right across the board. Here in Peel, our hospitals are stretched beyond capacity. We have seen this, our population has just grown completely beyond what our hospitals are built for. So we do have a lot of work to do there. So we would, with the Queensway expansion site, so that was first announced back in 2017, we would move forward with that because here in Mississauga, we do need more capacity to make sure that our growing community continues to have the access that they need for healthcare. But beyond that, we also know that we're not just Mississauga, we're part of Peel, and we're a wonderful community. So we would make the Peel Memorial Site a full standalone hospital and also build a third hospital because we recognize that there are a lot of people right here who are really struggling to get the care that they need in the time that they need. But I think one of the biggest lessons that the current government failed to learn during the last 2 years was about paid sick days. And this is something that hit us so hard during the pandemic. Just in our industrial sector alone, right here in Peel, we have about 300,000 essential workers. And we know that when people are earning lower income or are precariously employed, they often cannot afford to choose to stay home when they're unwell, because staying home might mean missing groceries, missing rent, or even losing their job. So people would go to work when they were sick. People would send their children to school when they were sick because they had no choice. This is not a new problem. This is something that always happens every flu season, as my family knows far too well. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that we can enable people to do what we're asking them to do. The current government, one of the first things they did was strip back 2 paid sick days. Sorry, I can remember just a sec. I was part of this deputation to Bill 47 back in 2018, fighting the current government to hold on to paid sick days that we already had, but those weren't enough either. So we would put in 10 days of so sorry, Monica. We need paid sick days. We need enough of them. We have to take care of each other.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jill. I did want to, we're getting, you guys have done a fantastic job. We are getting a little tight on time. We have a question from the audience. We also would like to give, we'll give you 2 minutes over it. Is that okay for us? Janju? Oh, yeah, this is, we are very short, but please come here close so that you can have the,
I get to my statement.
I guess moderate, thank you very much. And everybody, I really like your comments on that national projects and essentially letting people have some options to submit to the country. The Washington thing is phenomenal. I remember when young, lots of passion down there, especially the corporate side of things. My name is Rod Ketchu. I have a mechanical engineering background. I've been civil in the armed forces for 12 years, 8 years of combat engineers, about 3 years psychological operations. So quickly, we're talking about climate change. We have. Thanks.
yeah, actually you can do that.
Thanks. Is that clear?
Yes.
We have a different approach. So definitely we're concerned with CO2. However, I did project supervision for a biological reactor. We had a algae type material, and we would feed in CO2, and with sunlight, you can now have ethanol. And there was also a diesel variant. Actually, it was from Joule Incorporated in Boston. So we need to work to free up some of these things and make them open source. So we're not useless leaders. We should benefit from what's been given because a lot of people use the infrastructure. They turn on the lights. They made their brains work like here because of all of us collectively working to help them use their brains. So that kind of speaks to the corporate side of things. We have to free up some of this technology. It is there. You want to burn all the CO2 you want, you can sequester it and bring it down to New Mexico. They can use it. You can pipe it in. There's lots of creative ways. And I'm not saying it's a problem, but there's unique ways to deal with it. As far as the energy transition, we have to consider too. We got volcanoes spewing out endless amounts of CO2. We have forest fires. So at the same time, we do know that China and India are getting away with higher burning. So we need to be more diplomatic in our approach, slowly phasing it out. Let's not, I don't want to freeze to death. Like this is serious stuff right now, especially with the fuel costs. I did see the sign. Can I just quickly go on because
I think we can give you one more minute. We do have a couple of questions from the audience we'd like to get to.
well, let me go on the native one because so that's and not because it's fashionable, but like I have a very
Hit your highlights.
thank you so much. Basically, you can employ RO systems in the military. We have something called RO systems, reverse osmosis purification. Get the red shirts. They're basically native trained military individuals. They can run the RO systems. We have individuals who can try. I mean, I hope someone uses this if I don't get elected. Use them, and then you also have a lot of natives who are boiler makers. You can have a lot of fats. You can make cisterns. Boil the heck out of the water through the RO system. Rather, you run it through the membranes. It's good water, and it also keeps them, you know, stable. And then you can move the systems around. It's very easy through the military. I have a lot of things on time. I will be outside if you're more than interested. Thank you. Kindly, that was phenomenal.
I appreciate you giving us your space. Wonderful. Okay, so, yes, I know we're really short on time. We will have 2 minutes still for, your concluding remarks, but we have a couple of questions from the audience that I think would be really nice to be able to address, and Rose is putting the, finishing statements on there. So what else should voters in Mississauga-Streetsville know about you, not your party or your platform, to give us confidence that you are the right person to represent us in Native Queen's Park? So why don't we, I think we can give for that one just a minute to everybody. I think you can get that done. So why don't we go in, I'll start with Nicholas and then Jill and then Riyadh.
I guess I'll say this. First and foremost, my #1 issue has always been healthcare. I have been a lifelong mental health care advocate. This is an issue that has affected me personally and continues to affect members of my family every single day. And I'm so proud to be running on our platform, to be running on universal mental health care that will get people the help they need in Ontario right now. And the whole reason I got involved in politics is I cannot stand the corruption. I cannot stand how our politicians always serve two masters. I believe we need a government that focuses solely on the needs of working class, middle class people. And I know for a fact that is what the NDP represents. That's why we're running on a $20 an hour minimum wage. That's why we're running on universal pharmacare. That's why we're running on ending the school repair backlog over $15 billion and strengthening our hospitals right here in Ontario. There are solutions to these problems. But we just need a government that is courageous enough to not coddle up the big money, to not coddle up the corporate power, but instead fight for people right here in our community. We haven't seen that for decades upon decades. We need a real change right now to meet these issues. I've been a fighter my whole life. I will fight for you at Queen's Park, and I'm ready to do the job.
Thank you. Okay, Jill. Yes. So just remind yourself about you. What is it that we need to know about you? For 1 minute.
Okay, so I'm a small business owner. I'm raising my family right here in Mississauga. I'm a mom of 3, 2 living kids who are attending our public schools, and as I said, I have seen the good that our governments can do when they really do believe in better for our communities, and I've seen how that can be affected. So for me, it's talk about me. I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about the work that we can do. But I have seen the consequences throughout my life. We do deserve a government that's going to do much better for us. And I have spent the last 6 years since losing my son fighting for better. It's not something I wanted to do. I wish I could have my old life back. I wish I could just go back to being a regular mom with 3 little kids, and they'd be at school, and none of this would be the way that it is. But my life got turned completely upside down, and we can't keep going the way that we're going right now. We deserve so much better than this. So I have been spending the last 6 years knocking on every door from my school board all the way up to the Prime Minister's office, fighting for policies that are actually going to make our lives better. Whether it's about public health, whether it's about public education, we can't keep going this way. I'm not going to give up. Whatever happens June 2nd, I'm going to keep being that same annoying person who bothers our elected representatives, but I'm going to be so much better at it if I actually have one of those seats at the table. So I am here to keep working for us, and just, that's it. Let's make things better. We deserve better in our community.
Thank you very much. So, yeah,
Thank
these
you.
sort of seem to be turning into concluding remarks anyway.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to, yeah, so do you guys just want to take this as your concluding remarks then? Okay, yeah.
Thank you. I have a three-step approach in which I operate, and why I would be the best, I think, is really applicable here. Listen, learn, act. That is who I am. That's the way I operate in my profession, in my life, in my family life, every week. Listen to what you guys have to say. Listen to what problems, listen to your, not just what the problems, but how we can solve it. Then on top of that, we learn how best to solve the problem. We finally devise a plan of how best to solve the problem. And then lastly, we put an action plan in place and we solve the problem. That is the way I operate. That's the way I work all through my career, all through my life. That's the way I've done it. Not only in the private sector, but in the public sector. And that is the reason I think would be I would be a perfect candidate to represent you out there at Queen's Park. Thank you.
I think now we can give applause to our candidates. So thank you. I think that we could probably keep going because there's an awful lot to discuss here, but for the interest of time, we do need to wrap up. So once again, thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. This was a great event. Really, really enjoyed hearing this, and thank you very much for your attendance and your interest and your attention here. And with that, I guess we'll say thank you so much for people online, people here, and I think the candidates will still be here if you have something that you wish to ask them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.